Hello and welcome back to Cue the Cameo. I am here to talk about Aliens Earth, and I could not be more excited. This show just had its 2-episode premiere on Hulu this week, August 12th. The show was created by Noah Hawley, who is known for his Fargo TV series adaptation, as well as Legion, the TV show about Charles Xavier's son. All right, so let's get into the context of this TV show. For those of you who might not be familiar with the Alien franchise, leading up to now, starting from 1979 to 2024, we have only had Alien movies. This is the first standalone Alien TV show that we have gotten. Now, this TV show is set in 2120, which is 2 years before the events of the first Alien movie that stars Sigourney Weaver. In this show, we get the classic parallel storylines of aliens running amok and murdering everybody, creating very gory but fun and entertaining scenes on the screen. But we also get that parallel storyline of artificial intelligence grappling with their existence and place alongside humanity. I think the show really brings the storyline together, AI on the one hand and evolution, and it's going to be really interesting seeing these kind of two superior beings being pitted against each other throughout the storyline of the show. On the one hand, we have the xenomorphs. On the one hand, we have these new hybrid beings created by the Prodigy Corporation, which we'll get into in a minute. And I'm excited to see where this storyline takes us. So the show follows a brother and a sister, Marcy and CJ, aka Hermit. Now, Marcy, who is pretty immediately renamed to Wendy, is the first hybrid being created by Prodigy, a mega corporation set in this Earth that rivals the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, which of course is canon from the Alien franchise movies. Marcy, renamed Wendy, is the first hybrid and enhanced being who has a synthetic body but the brain of a child cancer patient who is terminal. Once Wendy's successful transfer is complete, the child Prodigy CEO then brings in 5 more terminally ill children and transfer consciousness into synthetic bodies. The company is headed by child prodigy Boy Cavalier and is a competitor to the canon Weyland-Yutani Corporation that we see in the Alien franchise movies. Wendy's brother CJ, who believes Wendy is dead, work some distance away as a medic. In the first episode, we see a Weyland-Yutani spaceship carrying a plethora of alien specimens, including the xenomorph facehugger, crash into a Prodigy building, thereby killing most of the crew, well, almost all of the crew, except for their synthetic, Morrow, accidentally, or maybe not so accidentally, unleashing the alien species onto Earth. Wendy, recognizing her brother in crash footage on the news, insists on being sent to the crash site in order to retrieve her brother and ensure his safety. Now, she pleads with the CEO of Prodigy, the boy genius, to let her be sent there. The CEO, of course, has his own intentions. He wants to collect these alien specimens. He wants to know what is on his biggest competitor's ship. And so he agrees to send the 6 child soldiers essentially to the crash site to check it out. Accompanying them is Timothy Oliphant's chief scientist, Kirsch, who instead of being a hybrid is a full synthetic. He, of course, still sees these hybrids as human beings or human-like beings, and there is still an interesting level of othering that occurs throughout the episodes. Now, historically in the Alien franchise, we have only had one evil megacorporation, which is Weyland-Yutani, but here we learn that there are 5. Prodigy being the main competitor of Weyland-Yutani and the main antagonist entity that we see in the first 2 episodes. At the beginning of the show, the context is set that these 5 corporations control various planets and sectors within our solar system and are fighting not only for space travel, but also for the artificial intelligence and race to human immortality. The race to human immortality is really defined by the creation of enhanced beings. Now, in this show, there are 3. The first being a cyborg, who is a cybernetically enhanced being who not only has the power to integrate seamlessly and speak to technology, but also has physical modifications as well. We see one of the characters, Moro, essentially grow a knife out of one of his synthetic arms. The second is synthetics. These are fully synthetic AI beings. I would liken this to the android David that we see from the Alien franchise. They are fully programmed, and I think the precedent is set that they contain or feel less emotion. The third is hybrid. So this is an example of Wendy where we get a human consciousness transferred into a synthetic body that has physical abilities that are superior to humans, mental capacity that is greater, and also some level of technological manipulation as well. So we learn in the first episode that the reason why these hybrid beings have to have child consciousnesses transferred into them rather than adult consciousnesses is because the child mind is much more moldable and much more flexible, whereas the adult brain is a little bit more stiff and set in their ways. And so there's this interesting dynamic of the childlike mentality combined with a superior adult-like capability that we'll get into a little bit more later, but I think brings a really interesting element into this show. So out of these three enhanced beings, different corporations are essentially betting on different versions. Prodigy is, of course, leading the research behind the hybrid beings, whereas we've seen in the past, Weyland-Yutani has been more focused on androids or synthetics. Now, as of course, with the Alien franchise that we've seen in the past and the dynamics between the crew and David, there is always some tension around the human race kind of dealing with the integration of synthetics or cyborgs or the newly created hybrids integrating into society. And so we get to see a little bit of that start to build up in the first episodes where there's some tension around the Weyland-Yutani crew and their synthetics on cyborgs on board. So I think it'll be really interesting that they are bringing the AI, synthetic and now hybrid storyline as really a more core part of this storytelling and lore in the Alien franchise. And so I'm interested to see how it goes. Now, just knowing that this show is set 2 years before the first Alien franchise, where, of course, we see synthetics, I'm interested to understand whether hybrids kind of fizzle out or it's something that, Prodigy maybe only owns the IP to, and so Weyland never quite figures it out. But I'm really enjoying having these kind of three different enhanced beings introduced into the Alien universe and seeing how these three enhanced beings play a role in defining the philosophy behind AI. Aside from the AI versus humanity theme, we also get the classic Alien themes of capitalist greed and the ethics morality behind intelligence and capability. Okay, so the first thing I actually want to talk about is what I alluded to earlier around the juxtaposition between the child themes and the child mentality that exist within the show versus the adults and the synthetic mentalities. And I think that the contrast that the show brings is absolutely genius. Okay, so the first thing I actually want to talk about is the juxtaposition between the kind of child minds, like perspective that we get in the show versus the adult and fully synthetic ones. Now, of course, because the child consciousnesses are transferred into these hybrid synthetic bodies, we get these incredibly physically and mentally capable beings kind of trapped within the confines of a child mentality. And I think it brings about a really interesting way to tackle the conversation around humanity choosing to invest in growing AI as the future of humanity instead of nurturing humanity itself. And that just feels so real with what's going on in the world today. So let's talk a little bit about the AI themes within this show. Moro, who is the Weyland-Yutani cyborg, is absolutely the new David.
Or Ash even.
Every scene I saw with Morrow, I quite literally could not keep up with my notes. Everything was so intentional and captivating. He does David in a way that I almost want to say is maybe better than David himself, who is an icon. Morrow, the cyborg, and Wendy, the human synthetic hybrid, are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. We see Wendy take on the obstacles within these first two episodes with a level of empathy and enthusiasm and fearlessness that we can only find within the human race, whereas we see Morrow a little bit more cold and calculating, and towards the end of episode 2, maybe a hint of ego in there as well. And so throughout the storyline, I feel like it's almost like a video game where we have these two characters facing the same scenario, each representing different things, but there's almost this team synthetic and team hybrid going on as they face off the xenomorphs. And I love it because it almost kind of reminds me of the video games in a way, and you're watching these first two episodes kind of seeing things from different perspectives, and it feels like you are in a game with playing from two different perspectives. Now, the message of the Alien franchise, I think, has always been to some degree, proceed with caution over progress when it comes to AI, which is something that I've really loved watching the entire franchise walk the line of, and now we get to see a little bit of that in this TV series as well. Like in the scene where Morrow is completely expressionless, closing and bolting the door, leaving his crew members to be consumed and ripped apart by the xenomorph while he finds a way to crash land the spaceship back onto Earth to get the specimens to the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. He is cold, he is calculating, he is just doing what his mission is, and there's not even an ounce of regret or empathy in him. And just seeing that scene, I was captivated by his performance. And it felt like it was a tribute to David. And I think this tribute is even more special in a way because David is actually really the origin story for this entire Alien franchise. He is father, if you will, of the xenomorph. He created them. And so I think having this little moment that kind of harkens some of David's past actions was a great way to kind of draw the parallels between what's happening in this TV series and what's happened in the franchise. So again, I think it was so fun watching these hybrid soldiers with child minds navigate the crisis on Earth that is happening with these aliens. Like I said earlier, they are treating the aliens almost like bugs, where this level of ignorance makes them kind of removed from the situation, yet because they're being told what to do by adults, they're just kind of blindly following along. And Sydney Chandler plays Wendy's character so well. I think she's really able to walk that line between being a newly formed hybrid synthetic, but also really kind of bringing through those elements of humanity and childlike philosophy into there as well. We see her fearlessly walk into battle, not worried about the consequences. On the one hand, I think attributing that again to this childlike naivete, but also maybe attributing it to the fact that she is in this new body that she knows, or rather has been told, is completely unbeatable. And I think the way that they do this represents how children see the real world, where there is this level of ignorance that gives way to a fearlessness and confidence because they don't actually know what is out there. And it's this ignorance is bliss, ignorance is fearlessness philosophy that I think works so well for the hybrid synthetics in this series. I think one of the two favorite scenes in the first two episodes is when the hybrid unit is on the plane. They're about to land at the crash site, and the gravity of the situation is kind of weighing in on the audience. And yet you see two of the soldiers just playing rock, paper, scissors on one of the seats, completely kind of unaware of the level of like seriousness of the situation that they're walking into, which kind of cracked me up a little bit. There's another moment where they're walking through the crashed ship where there are aliens on the loose, or rather bears, because they don't know any better. And they make a remark about how it's like the zoo, but all the animals are out of their cages. And again, I think it's like this dumbing down of the situation, this perspective of innocence that, again, just makes for such entertaining TV for this series. There's a moment in the show where there's a debate being had around the future of humanity as it relates to these synthetics or hybrids, and how they really can represent the immortality that humanity is looking for. And the argument is had that the synthetics are really just an AI that get smarter and smarter and smarter until they will ultimately cause the demise of humanity rather than the immortality of it. Whereas with a hybrid, by importing the consciousness of a human into a synthetic, we truly are preserving humanity itself, which makes, I think, and sets up an interesting point for how these two different types of enhanced beings will interact and approach situations throughout the TV show. And I think along with the AI themes is really, the question of what defines sentience and what defines humanity. If we have a synthetic or an android, right, that is fully sentient and develops to grow emotions, like, is that what defines a human? And in turn, can we consider something that is digitally created a human? And so there is kind of a tense scene where Wendy is pleading the boy genius CEO of Prodigy to let her go on this expedition to the crash site in order to help retrieve some of the samples and secure the site that the boy genius is looking for, but also in order to reconnect with her brother and make sure that he is safe. Now, she is pleading with him to let her go, and he kind of makes this remark of like, all this emotion, it's almost like you as a hybrid are human. And she responds by saying that she is human. She does have these emotions, kind of reminding him that she is a little bit more than just an employee, a little bit more than just his creation. She has independent thought. And again, I think it's going to continue to play on the theme of, do we consider these hybrids human beings if they are living with a conscious, if they do have sentience, if they do feel emotion and have the memories and the experience of a human being, is that something that we can define as human? So I'm interested to see where the show kind of takes the storyline. Like I said, we've got pieces of that throughout the Alien franchise, mostly with the Prometheus and Alien Covenant movies, but I think we have yet to really see it be brought in as a really big theme in any of these. And so I'm interested to see how this impacts and ties into the Alien storyline more so than what we've seen before. So, of course, the second biggest theme throughout the Alien franchise is the thought of capitalist greed and evil capitalism. And there is no shortage of that in Aliens Earth. There are so many themes of ignorance and greed in this show, primarily with Boy Cavalier. There's this hilarious moment where Search and Rescue, who Hermit is part of, and he knocks on a door telling them to evacuate, and someone dressed in this kind of Marie Antoinette era costume comes out and basically ignores him and puts him down, because unless it is the trillionaire himself contacting him, he doesn't interact with these lowly peasants. And so it's kind of ironic seeing that interaction play out. The xenomorph, of course, shows up and kills them all. And it is this Marie Antoinette callback of eating the rich, and watching that quite literally happen live. And Hermit does such a good job of representing those of us who are just kind of over the capitalist system and have almost like literally lost the will to live. There's a scene where him and the rest of the search and rescue unit are entering the crash site, and a bunch of rubble falls and crushes a civilian standing right next to them, they kind of just glance over and then continue running in. And it's this combination of like seeing that they're so brainwashed into just doing their jobs, but in a way where it's just been kind of like beat down into them over time, is interesting to see that like lack of compassion in that moment. And then also seeing how the soldiers are so focused on doing their job and kind of ignoring the risks even after they've seen some evidence of aliens or some type of animal, right, who has been murdering the people who were on the crash site. And they're just so locked into a job. Like there's not even this thought of like, hey, this looks kind of dangerous. I think we need to get out of here. And so it's interesting, I think, setting the precedent that Prodigy and Wayland have created this status quo within the community and within their employees specifically, where they have just convinced them that they are nothing but cogs in a machine, and that is basically their reason for existence. And I think it's interesting when we get to the scene where Boy Cavalier is talking about his reasons behind creating the hybrids, where he wants to create a being who is as smart, if not smarter than him. And not just informationally, because Kirsch kind of satisfies or checks that box, but someone who can really challenge him on a more philosophical and creative level. And I think that there's this irony where the scenes are jumping back between him on this remote island in this corporate palace office that he's built, and Wendy being kind of boots on the ground at this scene where he's almost trapped by his own genius. He's confined to this building. He's not getting to experience anything interesting, and yet continues to complain about how bored he is and how he's looking for someone or something to challenge him. And the irony of it is, if he could get out of his own, physical and mental ego bubble, he probably would find something that challenges him a little bit more. Okay, so getting into the production, I am such a sucker for anything xenomorph related. I wish I had more xenomorph paraphernalia. The only thing I really own from the Alien franchise is a skin on Fortnite. But being able to see the xenomorph in some of these longer scenes with brighter lighting and full body shots, really being able to kind of see it travel and move around, was like everything I have been waiting for with the Alien franchise. Of course, the first movie came out in 1979, so the CGI in these movies have really kind of evolved a lot along the way. And I think what we are getting with this TV series is like what the fan base has probably been waiting for a very long time. I think the technology that they've brought in has been so great too. Of course, the spaceship that we see the Prodigy, of course, the spaceship that we see the Weyland-Yutani crew in at the beginning is an ode to the original 1979 Alien spaceship that Sigourney Weaver's character, Ellen Ripley, is on. But the technology that we see Morrow use, where he is using that Spider-Man-like webbing to capture the xenomorph and the taser to kind of incapacitate it, is something that we haven't seen in any of the Alien movies yet. It was almost like a little bit too easy in some ways. So I'm excited to see what other technology they bring into this TV show, whether it's like weaponry or containment. I think it'll be cool. We've already seen so many creative ideas in just the first 2 episodes. I am also living for all the new aliens that we are getting. I'm glad that the universe is expanding beyond the kind of slender man thing that we got in Alien Romulus. I'll talk about that in another episode. But I love seeing the kind of plethora of alien species that we've gotten in episode 1 and episode 2. They're so creepy and crawly and nasty, and the scene with the slug where they kind of bite into the soldier's neck and then it almost blows up like a tick. Oh my gosh, I think I got the goosebumps, especially because ticks are just my worst nightmare as a dog owner. I also really want to commend the producers and directors of the show for having such a truly diverse cast and finding talent that really lives up to it too. There wasn't anyone in the show so far that has really like taken me out of the world. They have all either played their roles as a synthetic, a cyborg, a hybrid, or a human so perfectly well, that the world that they are building is truly, truly so immersive. And I was listening to this in surround sound, and there were moments where I was having, sounds come out from behind me, and it was just, I felt like I was there with the characters. And I think that just is, I commend FX for like really investing in the show, investing in the CGI, investing in the casting, investing in all the world building to get it right. I think that they really saw the potential with this franchise and are going all in on it. And I'm really proud of them for doing that, because it's not every day that we get a franchise spinoff that works. We know that. We're Marvel fans. So all in all, I am so excited to see more about the show. I wish we were getting all episodes at once. I cannot wait until next week. Episodes release every Tuesday evening on Hulu. Stay tuned. We'll be back a little later in the season with more thoughts. I want to hear what you thought of the show in the comments. If you've seen episodes 1, if you've seen episode 2. As the episodes continue to come out, come back here, drop your feed back in the comments. I will be back later in the season to share more thoughts and perspectives on the show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.